One day in the future, portals opened between the real world and the game world. A variety of dungeons with monsters began to appear on Earth. Meanwhile, the bodies of some people were changed. They gained a window in the form of a system, and the strength to fight against monsters from the dungeons. Using the power bestowed by the system, people greedily began to plunder the resources of the dungeons. And while they were doing this with gusto, an abyss-level dungeon appeared, whose rulers were Adhisalai. He was the immortal Prince of Darkness, against whom people were powerless. For a military expedition against Adhisalai and the capture of the dungeon under the leadership of player Liu. And the strongest squad was assembled, the only goal of which was to destroy the dungeon boss in one fell swoop. The immortal ruler of the Adhisalaya dungeon had an unknown level of strength while others had it in plain sight. During the attack on Adhisalaya, he ordered all of his monster to destroy everyone, absolutely everyone without exception. The battle was fierce, everyone was killing each other in different ways, cutting, punching, blowing each other up. The king of the abyss Adhisalai himself also took part in the battle. He easily cut all his opponents, calling them weaklings that they could not even withstand one of his blows. Adhisalai was calm, as no one could resist him, when suddenly he noticed that huge spheres of golden light were heading towards him very quickly. The monsters that were around him immediately died, but he managed to use his shield and defend himself against the huge spheres. After he looked up from where these golden spheres came from, he asked Liu with a very menacing look, and he also came to meet his certain death. To which Liu replied that ordinary players were not suitable for his opponents. Then he told Adhisalaya to prepare to receive justice. Adhisalai, getting ready to jump to the top and calling Liu a righteous shit, said that he would disappear from his sight. Then, jumping to the top, he attacked player Liu. There was a very powerful and fast and beautiful battle between them. They fought so fast that only their shadow could be seen. Then Adhisalai struck a very strong and unexpected blow for Liu, which was able to knock him to the ground. Adhisalai was ready to deal the last blow to Liu, calling him a non-entity, while Liu was very shocked that Adhisalai was stronger than him and that his death was very close. Adhisalai had already swung his sword and was about to cut Liu's neck, but he heard a voice behind him telling him to surrender if his family's life is dear to him. Adhisalai, in a misunderstanding, turned back to the voice and saw a man pointing his finger at his family, telling him that they had taken them hostage and if the war did not stop its actions, it would kill each of them. Adhisalai turned back and weakened his defense against Liu, and thus was wounded right in the heart. Looking viciously into Liu's eyes, Adhisalai asked him if they were talking about this justice, taking his family captive to threaten him. Liu Jia replied with a satisfied face that they were only using all possible methods to defeat him and no more. This is a battle to the death, and any hesitation can cost a life, and Liu was willing to do anything to win. Adhisalai was very angry at his answer, and because of this, something started happening around his body. Red sparks shone around him and his eyes became redder and redder, calling them a bunch of hypocritical and vile creatures. He asked him if they thought to laugh at him. Liu, however, shouted for him to stop and asked what he wanted to do. Adhisalai grabbed Liu's hand and replied that he was going to take them all with him. After these words of his, there was a huge explosion that could cover all the players and monsters. The raid on the dungeon boss was over with his death. It seemed that everything had calmed down since then. But the story of Adhisalai was not over yet, as well as his sword remained intact after such an explosion. 10 years later, in the dungeon of the burial field, the players fought against monsters. The girl who was in charge shouted to her people that she would not disperse and keep the formation, because they definitely need to go through the dungeons. The battle went on for a draw until a Stitch appeared. He was very huge and held in his hands a large club with which he easily killed players. When the players saw the Stitch, they began to run away into the scattering. And the girl, looking at all this, was shocked and reflected that they had only recently entered the dungeons and had already suffered so much loss, and they had nothing left to do but. Without finishing her thoughts, she shouted in the direction of a bunch of people, pointing at them with her finger and calling them a bunch of parasites, so that they would also start fighting. To which one of them replied that it was not part of their contract. Their task is only to collect resources, and since they are in the dungeon for the first time, they have a very low level for battles against monsters. Another high-level player got into their conversation and holding a whip in his hands, he told them to shut their mouths, also asking them who in their opinion led them to a high-level dungeon. Then, clutching the whip in his hands, he ordered them to do what they were told, and those who decided to escape, he would personally kill him. Hearing these words, the guys rushed into battle, and the guy who objected to the girl also ran, thinking that these players clearly want to use them as bait. But on the other hand, this is a very great opportunity to raise their level, because the reward for killing an elite monster is very great. but only how can he do it? Meanwhile, Stitch continued to kill the players, and the girl was thinking that by sacrificing these nobodies, they would be able to save the lives of good wars. Having made a satisfied face, she has already told herself that in the end she will be able to deliver a fatal blow to the Stitch and thereby gain more experience. The guy, continuing to run to the Stitch, told himself that for Zio's sake he must return alive. And as far as he remembers, there was information about the Stitch in the monster handbook. He is fat, so his reservation is high, but if you hit a weak spot, he will die quickly. Finding a weak point, the guy rushed to her, continuing to tell himself that Zio would see how he would return to her alive. But suddenly 2 arrows flew from behind him, and one of them hit his right chest, and the second one hit the right side of his mouth. The girl who shot the Stitch, but hit the guy because he blocked her view, got angry and called him a brat. The guy could not move because of his wounds. He was shocked and did not want to believe in his imminent death, because he promised his sister, because she is waiting for his return. He kept worrying about his sister and died with these thoughts, because Stitch crushed him with his club. But almost immediately a huge blue sphere flew to his dead body. It moved into the guy's body and shone very brightly, thereby exposing the other players to misunderstanding. The guy's body got up from the ground to its feet and began to recover, and the girl who shot at him thought about how he could survive her blow. Then inwardly she insulted him by calling him trash. The guy, looking at his hand, said that the rebirth of the soul was a little delayed. Adhisalai was able to be reborn into the body of this guy, and while he was indignant that this guy was frail, it cost him a lot to become his receptacle. But since nothing can be done about it, Stitch was going to hit him again with his club, but Adhisalai noticed this, picked up the guy's sword, and he was able to defeat Stitch with an accurate blow. The system, after killing the monster, immediately drank that the elite monster Stitch was killed, so he was awarded 2,000 experience points and his level was raised to the 5th level. Adhisalai, grinning and calling Stitch a small fish, pondered, asking himself how he dared to attack him. Was he really in such a hurry to go to the next world? The players who saw all this were very shocked that a beginner like him with the 1st level could defeat such a monster with one blow, while other players with higher levels could not do it. The girl also wondered how he could defeat a monster with the 10th level, then she immediately assumed that he could cheat. Probably guessed the moment and struck the decisive blow, calling him a reptile. She was angry because he took her experience. Adhisalai, seeing the system notification, was surprised that she appreciated his power and raised him only to the 5th level. Then realizing that the higher the level the better, he smiled and asked himself a question: what now only Earth players have a system? He also added that there are many functions in it that he should study later. It's not for nothing that he spent 10 years restoring his soul. The day has finally come. Having said this, the system revealed a notification that the identity of the boss was recognized and demanded to unlock the exclusive right. Adhisalai repeated the words about the exclusive right, unblocked it and grinned menacingly to himself, so that everyone would prepare their necks, because the Demon King has returned. After unlocking the exclusive right, a huge purple war appeared behind Adhisalai. The battle continued, monsters were killing people, and people were killing them. One of the monsters managed to destroy the player with magic, but then Adhisalai immediately killed him by cutting his body, thereby receiving 5 points for killing the skeleton of the magician. Adhisalai looked at the system and thought that the player's system and the unlocked boss panel did not give him anything useful. But even vice versa. Adhisalai pondered for a moment, but then realized that he could not gain experience for killing monsters and raising the level, so he was stuck at the 5th level, but he gets so-called special conquest points from monsters. With their help, you can unlock a new right. Now Adhisalai has only a passive Conqueror's Gaze skill, which allows you to see the level and class of your opponent, and killing monsters brings only conquest points. After finishing these thoughts, Adhisalai looked at the squad leader of these players, and with the help of the skill, he saw that her name was Andrea. Her level was at the 20th level, and her class was a hunter. At first Adhisalai planned to kill all these players, but he does not know exactly how the system will behave. Besides, he has just been reborn. Plus, with Andrea's level, she will not leave a wet spot from Adhisalai with ease, and besides, she dislikes him from the very beginning. Then warning himself that he needed to be more careful so that his plan would not be revealed, because Andrea killed the last owner of this body. Adhisalai went to the captain of the holding a magic potion in his hands and offering it to her that she would take it. Sipping his hand with a magic potion, he said to himself that she would wait until he accumulated conquest points. Andrea, snatching the magic potion from his hands, began to inflate about how she didn't kill him for the shot. Then she immediately assumed that the boy could hide his strength, and besides, the boss battle is coming soon. There she will see what he is capable of. While Adhisalai and the team commander were thinking about their own, one of the players noticed that a blue flame appeared out of nowhere, then pointing his hand in his direction, shouting, asked the other players where this blue flame came from. Adhisalai, hearing this and looking at the flame, grinned and said to himself, so that's who the boss of this dungeon is. From the blue flame, a huge skeleton of a dragon with the 20th level began to appear. Andrea immediately told everyone that they would not understand, because they would be able to cope with him. Adhisalai immediately rushed back, telling everyone that who was where, but he was on his own. Andrea sent him shouting after her that as soon as she dealt with the boss, it would be his turn. The dragon started attacking all the players using its flame, but the players in front were able to protect others and themselves using their shields. After his attack, the dragon began to switch to a form with a heart. Adhisalai, being behind a stone in a safe zone, told himself that once the dragon switched to a form with a heart, his exit would soon come. The players that were in front ran closer to the dragon to destroy his heart, because now it is naked. But approaching the dragon, they immediately died because of the fire that engulfed them. Seeing all this, Andrea ordered everyone to attack from afar. Hearing her command, the players began shooting arrows and magic at the dragon. After their attacks, Andrea and all the players were removed and wondered if the dragon was immune to long-range attacks. Because the dragon was able to protect his heart from their attack, all the players were confused since the dragon could not be struck from either a long distance or a short distance. By the same time, Adhisalai smiled and said that it was his time to have a good time. Saying this, he rushed to the dragon. Looking at this, Andrea grinned and told him, calling him a cretin, that he would be killed by frying. The dragon, seeing Adhisalai, directed his huge paw at him, but he was able to stop him. With this action he subjected Andrew to a great shock. Adhisalai, calling all the players a herd of imbeciles, said that although the heart was discovered at the second stage, but this is only a bait that the dragon set after the first to lure them. During the first stage, the dragon breathes fire, thereby imposing a continuously accumulating effect on the enemy. And with the transition to the second stage, the dragon's heart releases a different kind of fire that ignites charged enemies, which is why it is impossible to approach the dragon at the first stage until it moves to the second. Having explained this, Adhisalai jumped straight to the dragon's heart, and having managed to hit him, he said that it would be easier to defeat the dragon. After Adhisalai came down to earth as soon as he managed to kill the dragon, he said that he remembers killing several such monsters in his youth, and is it even possible to appoint such weak monsters as a dungeon boss? After saying these words, Adhisalai looked at the system and saw that he had received 100 points for killing a dragon skeleton. Then, having told himself that now the lock of the new skill will open, he received a notification from the system that the accumulated conquest points have reached the required number to open a new rite, and now his skill dungeon binding is unlocked. After that, the system immediately suggested Adhisalai to bind the dungeons in which he is located. Having agreed to bind the dungeon, Adhisalai was surprised and glad at the same time because after binding the dungeon, a lot of hidden abilities were revealed. Adhisalai was not in a calm environment for long, because several small magical attacks soon flew to him. Seeing that Adhisalai could not dodge, Andrea started laughing at him, saying that he was still not experienced enough to compete with her. Then Andrea turned her head towards her people and told them that since the dragon was defeated, now according to the plan it is necessary to open a secret dungeon. The players heard her and began to carry out her order to sacrifice other players. A fight started, but in this fight people didn't kill monsters, but killed each other. Andrea also started killing other players, and when she aimed an arrow at the lying man, she heard about the plea that he would be released. He doesn't even need any reward right now. To which Andrea replied that dreaming is not harmful. After all, in order to open a secret dungeon, you need to sacrifice quite a lot of players. Having said that, she shot him in the head, thereby killing him, but she continued to say that she must definitely finish the assigned task. Otherwise the game will end for her. When Andrea asked herself if she needed to sacrifice even more, because the dungeon still hadn't opened, she felt a chill on her back. Without even having time to look back, Adhisalai killed all the players with a quick and precise movement that were around Andrea. For killing players, the system added 800 experience points to him. Then, looking at his hand in which he held the sword, he realized that experience points are not given for killing monsters, and after becoming a boss, he can earn experience points by killing other players. Andrea, seeing that Adhisalai was alive after her blow, was confused and asked herself how he could dodge her attack, and besides, what level does he have? She activated her insight skill in order to see what level he is at. But when she looked at him, she was even more shocked because she saw that he was a 5th level warrior. Then realizing that Adhisalai just has a relatively well-honed fighting technique, Andrea shouted to all the players that there was nothing to be afraid of because he was an ordinary 5th level warrior and could be easily killed. Hearing her order, Lu Ren went to Adhisalai with a huge weapon and shouted that he would deal with this green one now. Lu Ren is also a warrior class, but his level is 10th. As soon as Lu Ren began to approach, Adhisalai used the lightning ability. He was able to hit Lu Ren with it, and he couldn't budge. And as Adhisalai approached him, Lu Ren wondered about how an ordinary warrior could use magic. By this time, Adhisalai had already stabbed his right shoulder with a sword. Then Lu Ren realized that Adhisalai was pretending to be a warrior, and his real class is a magician. Then, swinging his weapon, Lu Ren pondered that his blow with all his strength, and even from such a distance, Adhisalai would not be able to survive. Swinging and already striking, Adhisalai was able to stop him with only one hand. His actions greatly exposed Lu Ren to fear and misunderstanding, how he was able to stop his blow using only one hand. But after Adhisalai stopped the blow, he struck Lu Ren's stomach, thereby killing him and gaining 1,000 experience points for killing the player. All the players watching this were shocked and wondered about what level he had. And you assumed that there could be a combat magician. Adhisalai, with a very evil aura around and with an evil voice, thanked Lu Ren for his fear and despair, because he was able to give him so many experience points and it was just enough for him to discover another new ability. Andrea ordered everyone to attack at once, but 2 of them did not listen to her, attacked Adhisalai, saying that 2 of them would be enough to kill him. While they were heading to Adhisalai, he was thinking that after binding the dungeon, he had gained a lot of passive skills. The system revealed 4 passive skills to him. The first is a swordsman of the 1st level. It allows you to add 10% to the damage from the sword and the chance to deal a critical blow. The second is a magician. It is also the 1st level and also allows you to add 10% to magic damage. Tritium is strength training. It is already the 2nd level and also allows you to add 20% to the strength. And the 4th is the control over the undead, and it also allows you to add 100% to the undead damage. Easily dodging the blows of 2 players, Adhisalai continued to inflate that it was still possible to spend conqueror points to study the special ability of the dungeon monster, as well as the early binding of the dungeon cost him 200 conqueror points, and unlocking the spell sander 50 conqueror points, and now he has 50 more left. There are too many players for Adhisalai to defeat them with what he has. Adhisalai needed to spend the remaining points, but he didn't know which ability would help here. But when he looked at the system panel, he noticed that there was another ability, and just the same, it only needed 50 to activate it. As soon as he took the ability to summon the undead, he was attacked by Andrina. When striking with a fire arrow, she shouted to Adhisalai that he would die, calling the name of the owner of the body Zhaoking. Adhisalai was unable to dodge quickly and thus he injured his left shoulder, although he could not dodge properly. But he immediately used his sword to step back. Seeing that she was able to injure Adhisalai's hand, Andrea then shouted to him that now he has a minus arm. And how is he going to fight now? To which Adhisalai replied that he would not need his hands. When he said that, the players behind Andrea died. Some unknown magic was able to destroy their heads. Everyone started panicking and asking what is it? And are there really more people in the dungeon? One of the players, defending himself from magical attacks, replied that he had already seen this spell. Then another player standing next to this player shouted that it was a skeleton mage, but they had already killed these monsters. Hearing loud bangs on the ground, Ander turned around and saw that the stitch also came to life. She wondered why all the monsters they had killed had suddenly come to life, and even more so now they were working smoothly, as if someone was controlling them. Then Andrea turned to the side where Adhisalai was standing, saw that most of the monsters were standing near him and did not attack. She also began to ask questions, that really all the devilry that was happening was his doing. But how did he manage to subdue and summon monsters? Hearing her questions, Adhisalai, with a smirk on his face and holding a picture of the ability in his hands, replied that he did not think that he would summon monsters from this particular dungeon, and the recharge of the ability turned out to be long. And besides, the same creatures could not be summoned elsewhere. Calling him a bastard and looking at him very viciously, Andrea asked where he, the scum, got such an ability from. Not getting an answer to her question, Andrea pulled out a golden thing like a whistle from her pocket, and said that it could only be used once. She expected to use it at the end to ask the boss of the dungeon Shadow Vault. Having said this, she blew on the whistle. Hearing the sound of this whistle, Adhisalai asked himself what kind of whistle it was it really a special object? After this sound was made, the forest that surrounded all the players began to sway. The birds all took off at once, and immediately 4 huge beasts, which were a bull, a bear, a tiger, and a wolf, quickly got out of the forest like shadows. As soon as they got out of the forest, the cut rushed to the monster to kill them. Looking at Adhisalai very proudly, Andrea said that it was an epic item that the chairman had given her. Then she sharply shouted to him that his monsters could not stand against the army of the King of Beasts. The whistle turned out to be the bone pipe of the King of Beasts, and the effect of it is the summoning of the Legion, which has the 15th level of the King of Beasts, which attacks the marked enemy, and it can be used only once in the dungeon. Adhisalai answered her with the question, does she really think that he can only control the warriors of the dungeon? After these words, a dragon skeleton flew over Andrea and fried a bear, and a wolf on the way to Adhisalai. And after the dungeon boss stood back at Adhisalai, he said in a very intimidating voice that it was time to die. Just as the dragon was about to grab Andrea with his paw, she told him to stop, because after killing her, he could forget about staying alive. Perplexed, Adhisalai repeated the word forget and told her to clarify. Andrea, sitting on the ground, began to say that they had come to seize this dungeon on behalf of the chairman of the guild blood relationship, Stoker. His goal is to get top-class equipment in a secret dungeon. He is a 40th level blood lord, and for him to kill Adhisalai is like pinning down an ant. To which Adhisalai replied to her words that he didn't care if he got in his way, because he would die. Then he asked Andrea if these words were her last. Andrea replied that no matter how good he was, there will always be someone better. Do not underestimate the influence of the chairman, because he took part in the murder of Mr. Lai Yu's cousin, saying that she immediately asked him a question. How does he do it? Now he realized how harsh the chairman is. Adhisalai replied to her that it was such a pity to waste the last words on ass licking. After saying these words, Adhisalai ordered the dragon to kill her, and he immediately executed his order by roasting her in his fire. After killing her, Adhisalai received 5,000 experience points for killing a player, and from this he reached the 10th level of the Rhinestone. Looking at these rises, Adhisalai said that for killing a player who has a high level, they give even more experience, and with the level increase, the system healed his wounds. He also said that he really likes being a player. After these words, the ground under his feet began to shake violently, and the system immediately notified that the required number of sacrificed players had been reached and now the secret dungeon was open. Immediately after this notification, a blue portal appeared in front of Adhisalai in the form of a huge door. After seeing it, Adhisalai asked if this door was a portal to a secret dungeon. Then he went on to say that judging by Andrea's words, there is a very rare equipment hidden there. After that, the system immediately notified Adhisalai that there was a very high level of danger. Looking at the system, he said that the system does not even know what danger is. Then Adhisalai sharply shouted that he was the most dangerous creature here, and he needed all the equipment that was there. Shouting this, he practically dispelled the system window with his hand. Remembering his equipment, Adhisalai looked it up in the system. His equipment took place only from a training bib. His endurance took place only from +4, strength took place from +2, and agility took place from -10. When he saw this, he immediately said whether this equipment was too weak. Then, turning to the corpses of the players, he continued to say that it was better to change equipment before going inside the dungeon. Besides, the players always collected things after killing them, and now it was his turn to do so. Adhisalai stretched out one hand forward, ordered his monster that they would clean these corpses. After a few minutes all the corpses were in their underwear, and the monsters holding different equipment in their hands were standing near Adhisalai. Putting on all the equipment, Adhisalai was very pleased with the whole body, because the system has a transformation function for everything, so no one outside will know that he killed and plundered the players. And the system also provides a warehouse where you can put all the found items, which is extremely convenient. Fully equipped, Adhisalai was ready to enter the secret dungeon. When he entered, he saw a door and 2 huge statues holding weapons in one hand. Going inside, Adhisalai immediately thought about the fact that he was familiar with this castle, then asked himself if he had ever been here before. Then Adhisalai began to assume that at that time all his possessions were turned by an unknown force into what players call dungeons. But then they were attacked by enemy troops. The monsters living in these dungeons also belonged to him, and this place was once part of his lands. But now it is not. When Adhisalai looked at the system and saw the blocked summoning ability, he realized that it would not be possible to use it in this dungeon. When he was thinking about it, two statues standing near the door came to life and blocked the entrance to the door with their weapons. These statues turned out to be the stone guardians of the statue, of which the golem is a race, and their level is the 40th. Adhisalai smiled and said that he did not expect anything less from the secret dungeon, because even the opponents are 30 levels higher. Suddenly, the statues knelt down, and the door itself, seeing these actions, Adhisalai immediately guessed that he was being invited inside, and there was obviously some kind of trap inside. But Adhisalai immediately went inside saying that he didn't care about traps, only brave men survive. And when was the last time Adhisalai felt fear? Once inside, Adhisalai immediately rushed forward thinking that the most important thing is to capture the dungeon and get rare equipment. And since the opponents have as much as the 40th level, then who knows how much more dangerous enemies he can meet on the way to the boss. While he was thinking about it and moving quickly through the corridors, the undead that were at the top of the ceilings jumped right onto Adhisalai, telling him that he would be afraid because he would become their food. The undead who attacked him were punishing ghost spiders having the 15th level and race of the undead. He was also attacked by ghouls having the same level and race as the ghost spiders. Adhisalai was able to easily dodge all of them, and when he saw that all the monsters are undead races, he looked at them with a smile and asked if this was a gift to him, because he is an expert in the massacre of their race. The monsters were shocked by what Adhisalai said, but right after he said it, he activated the passive skill plus 100% to undead damage and killed some ghouls. The rest of the undead saw this and started attacking Adhisalai using magic, but he was able to dodge them without any problems, and also using the magic of the skeleton of the magician, he was able to kill all the remaining undead using current. For each monster killed, the system forced Adhisalaya 5 points. After the end of the massacre, Adhisalai, kneading his shoulder, said that this was a great skill, and at the same time he was able to warm up on low-level undead. Then, looking at the mountain of monster corpses, Adhisalai continued to say that he imagined the secret dungeon to be much more complicated, and it had been a long time since he had had fun bloody fights. Having said that, he opened the system, because now with the points he has won, he can study several abilities. When he saw that there was a fireball ability, he immediately took it. After walking a little, he saw a huge iron door and immediately assumed that there was probably a boss there. Walking to her, Adhisalai asked himself, how strong can the boss of a secret dungeon be? When he opened the door, he was surprised, because instead of the boss there was a magic circle on the floor in the room. But Adhisalai immediately remembered what had been there before, but at the same second the system notified him that his blood was needed to awaken the boss. After cutting his hand and stretching it over the magic circle, Adhisalai said that he didn't really want to do this, but who knows if he might get lucky. Blood began to drip onto the magic circle, and at the same time Adhisalai was saying to himself that without any doubt, now he has no chance to overcome her. When the blood got to the magic circle, the Lady of the Alps, Selena, came out of it, whose level was 40th, and she had a vampire race. As soon as Selena appeared, she called Adhisalai vile and asked how he dared to break the seal that her master had set with his dirty blood. She also told him that their promise was to come into force in just 100 years, now because of this he will pay with his life. Adhisalai, as soon as she said this, attacked her with an indifferent expression, using a fireball. He did this because he wanted to check the difference between the 40th level and his 10th level. But Selena was not even scratched by this attack. She spread this fireball and immediately told him that he would not even try to injure her with such insignificant attacks. Having said that, she very quickly turned into a tornado, and in the blink of an eye she was behind Adhisalai. He reacted very slowly to her appearance from behind, but at least he managed to summon the shield from the system warehouse and save himself. Flying away from her, he realized that the difference between them was too great, because even having managed to summon the shield, he was seriously wounded from inside. Selena immediately rushed to him after the blow. She magically made her left hand huge, like a paw. She attacked him with it, but he barely managed to defend himself using a sword. But Selena struck another powerful blow, with which Adhisalaya was able to slap into the wall. After this blow, she approached Adhisalai and said that she had been sealed in a magic circle for a very long time, and now she can't wait to remember the taste of blood. But surprisingly, Adhisalai was calm about his imminent death, and Selena, saying that he would pay for his crime, attacked him with her teeth. But as soon as she tasted his blood, she immediately pushed herself away from him, asking how is this possible. Adhisalai smiled and said that vampires can see the memories of those from whom they drink blood, then immediately asked her, now does she know who he is? To which Selena replied, very embarrassed and looking at him with loving eyes, of course she knows him. and calling him Mr. Adhisalai. She jumped into his arms saying that it turns out he is her liberator from the magic circle. Adhisalai, having made a very unhappy face, thought to himself that she was annoying as always. She pursued him 12 years ago. She pursued him even while bathing, but it was awkward for him to kill her because of friendly relations with the head of the vampire clan. So he sealed her in a magic circle for 100 years, saying that he would break the seal at the expiration of the term and marry her. This secret dungeon seemed familiar to him, and the two huge statues guarding the entrance did not attack him, because it was he who created everything here. Adhisalai would not have taken off the stove for anything if he had not been in despair. Touching his head, he pushed Selena away, saying that she would keep her distance. Getting up from the ground, he asked her, since she had drunk his blood, should she understand why he was here. Selena immediately joyfully replied, of course she understands. These vile people viciously defeated him. Then she asked him to let her take revenge on them for this. Adhisalai, looking at her with a serious look, asked her that now she knows how he treats her, and that he purposely sealed her. How does she feel about all this? Selena answered him that of course she didn't know, saying that she abruptly hugged Adhisalai's leg, shouting that she loved him. When Adhisalai thought to himself that this was a serious case, he felt that something was happening inside his body, and at the same moment the system notifies him that an infection with vampire poison has been detected, and that the vampire boss has been unblocked. Touching his forehead, Adhisalai said that he had forgotten about the fact that a person poisoned by vampire venom becomes one himself. But this situation is only in his favor, although vampires are not as strong as demons, but their bodies are many times stronger than human bodies. Then the system notified him that the passive skill improvement of the vampire of the first level was automatically unlocked, whose health is +10, regeneration +100, strength +5, and agility +5. Also at night all bonuses are doubled, and the damage from light and fire effects on the vampire is increased. Selena, at the same time, continuing to hug Adhisalai's leg, told him not to worry, because she would help settle scores with those bastards. Hearing her words, Adhisalai thought that although she was annoying, she was reliable, and with her help he would be able to overcome many difficulties in the future. After thinking about it, he looked to the side and asked Selena if she had high-level equipment here. Having said that, he assumed to himself that since this is a dungeon, it should be. Selena is looking around and asking the words high-level equipment. She said that there was no such thing here, but immediately remembering something, she continued to say that there was something, but he needed to wait a little. Having said that, she got up from the floor and ran into another room saying that she would be back in a moment. She really immediately returned to Adhisalai, but already holding the clothes in her hands, she brought it to Adhisalai saying that although she did not have high-level equipment, but she had a dowry that she wanted to give it to him after waking up. She also added that some say it was made by the ancestor of vampires himself. Hearing her words, he told her that she was looking far, then he asked her if this devotional was a magical garment. But then picking it up, the system gave information that this is a bloodsucker's outfit, and the level is epic. This robe gives him health +1000, MP +500, strength +100, endurance +300, intelligence +200, and resistance to effects +100. The special effect of this garment is that when defeating players, it pumps equipment, and at the moment it is at the initial level. The first level skill Invisible Blood Shadow is also unlocked. With its help the player becomes invulnerable for 1 second and cannot be selected. Adhisalai was surprised that clothes can be pumped and she also has a skill. Hearing this, Selena asked him, aren't these ordinary clothes? Or can he see what is available to the players? After her questions, Adhisalai realized that as a player he could see the properties and abilities of the equipment. He also said that he is more and more surprised by the opportunities available to players. After that, the system asked him if he wanted to change his equipment. Saying that it was time to change, he agreed. The clothes he was holding in his hands, after his consent, immediately put on her by herself abruptly. After putting on his clothes, he said that this was indeed an epic level equipment. His past was nothing compared. He received not only high level equipment, but also, without fully saying the sentence, he looked at Selena, who was looking at not very in love, and said with her eyes that this equipment really suits him. After looking at her, Adhisalai finished the sentence by saying that he also received a subordinate of the 40th level. Then, putting on the mask that was included in the epic outfit, Adhisalai said that it was time to get out of this dungeon and go to the human world. Having already reached the exit, Adhisalai was thinking that even though he had collected a big catch, but in the world of players dangers lurk from all sides. So he needs to think carefully before and hide his identity and abilities, and as soon as they bite, he will strike his blow. By this time he was already out of the dungeon, but happily the next Selena was electrocuted just as she was about to get out of it. Hearing her screams from behind, he turned around and said that he was thinking and had completely forgotten. Whatever Selena escaped from the dungeon, Adhisalai installed a magic barrier. His weapon was the key to this barrier, but Adhisalai has no idea where it is now. For sure it was taken by the player who killed him. After these thoughts, Adhisalai began to leave, seeing that Selena shouted his name, to which he replied by raising his hand, waving to her that he could not remove the barrier now, but as soon as the opportunity arose, he would release her. Hearing this, Selena caressed herself and told him how spoiled her master was, that he could not stop keeping her here, but she would wait for her master's return. As Adhisalai was leaving, he thought to himself that he already somehow did not want to let her out. Then, coming out of the dungeon, Adhisalai said that such a sight reminds memories of the time when he ruled by dishonesty. He said that because when he came out, all the monsters he could control in the first dungeon were bowing to him. Looking at the evil spirits, Adhisalai continued to say that he was interested in this. The players he killed said that his class was a warrior. Then it turns out that he also got a player class. Then, opening the system, Adhisalai found the rating of players. From there he learned that his class really is a warrior, but Nepo has no skill points yet. After thinking a little, he continued to say that if he unlocks abilities, he will be able to hide his own abilities. The system showed him 3 types of abilities. The first is cutting through armor. With its help, the player strikes a powerful blow that reduces the enemy's armor by 25%. The second is a battle cry. He roars, imposing fear on the enemy. For a while and for 10 seconds the player increases the attack power. The third is shockwave. A shockwave created by a weapon can cause damage to an area. After learning all this, Adhisalai said that it was time to get out of this dungeon, but first he had to change clothes, otherwise good equipment might attract the wrong attention. Before entering the portal leading to the human world, Adhisalai said that he was going to take revenge on the world of players. In the human world, where the portal opened, there were a lot of people with cameras, as well as some people tried and bought magic things, and not which of them are also players. One of the players said, looking at the portal, that although the dungeons are for beginners, they have level restrictions. Then the other player continued with a clenched fist. If he passes, he will not leave a stone unturned. That's who would have thought that the equipment would be exactly there. Another player sitting on the shoulder of a huge robot told him to calm down, because the portal is changing, which means that someone is coming. After these words of the player, Adhisalai left the portal and immediately ordered the system to close the passage. Then he said to himself that he needed to pass for his own, and it was good that he could control the Tide dungeon. As soon as Adhisalai came out of the portal, people started taking pictures of him and recording the news for the whole world. The person who was selling various magical items also quickly approached him, asking if there was any suitable equipment in the dungeon. Having asked this, he offered Adhisalai to sell them if there are resources. He can also take them and he will not offend at the price. The players standing there were at a loss why he came out alone. Then one of them asked the others who he was. And is he in our team? The same player, having asked these questions, calling Adhisalai an infection and pointing at him with his finger, now asked him questions about where the other players were, and was he really able to take out all the equipment. Adhisalai was standing with his back to him and with a serious face, but when he turned around, he immediately changed his face, smiling. He replied that there was a tragedy in the dungeon, because as soon as they entered, everyone was in great danger, but in the end they barely defeated the dungeon boss. After that, he didn't want to follow the huntress captain. She didn't like it and she started killing everyone, so he had to fight back. As a result, everyone died, and since he is the weakest, he hid and was able to survive. After listening to his story, the player who asked those questions shouted at him not to pretend to be a fool, then immediately asked him if he had equipment. Adhisalai answered him with a question. What kind of equipment is it about? And he knows a lot about it. His answer only made this player very angry, but without giving him a word to say, Adhisalai looked at him with a sharp look and continued to ask him if he was the one who ordered the captain to kill the others. Hearing this, the player was going to attack him, telling him that he would die. Adhisalai continued to stand still and be completely calm. As soon as the player's hand approached Adhisalai's face, he heard his name written and the words that he would stop. He immediately stopped. A very young boy sitting on the shoulder of a huge robot asked for forgiveness, introducing himself as a representative of the guild blood relationship stoker. Then he again asked for forgiveness for his rude subordinate. Turning around with the robot on which he was sitting, he told his subordinates that it was enough to disgrace themselves and it was time to leave. Rutan, walking next to the robot, asked Stoker that he would really let Adhisalaya go so easily, to which Stoker replied that in this world the law is above all, besides there are too many witnesses, and also the general manager of the union is also here, so now is not the right time for a showdown. Rutan said again that you can't just let him go anyway. Stoker agreed with him and said that first you need to find out who he is, and also, stopping talking and making a very intimidating, Stoker continued that if they want to kill him, then you need to do it in one blow, and not stop any evidence. Adhisalai, looking in their wake, having spoken to himself, asked about the fact that Stacker is so young and already secretly turns illegal affairs, smiles, but is ready to stick a knife in his back, then making a serious expression on his face continued to inflate that when the time comes he should deal with him. Adhisalai's thoughts were interrupted by the general manager of the union. He called his name Zhaoking. He introduced himself by saying that he is the general manager of the players' union, Lao Zhan. When Adhisalai turned to him, Lao Zhan asked to check his identification level, because he had just come out of this dungeon. Adhisalai also asked him if he wanted to check his level, while he himself was thinking in his thoughts about whether he could find out that he is the boss, whether he has the 45th level. And if so, he is stronger than all those people put together. While Lao Zhan was checking his level with a special magic stone, Adhisalai compared the players' alliance to the tiger's stealing. From checking, Lao Zhan found out about his name, rank, which is an ordinary player, class, which is a warrior, and his level, which is the 10th level. This knowledge shocked Lao Zhan very much, because Adhisalai is only the 10th level. Then he told him, even though he was pumped, but it's just not likely that he managed to get out of the burial fields alive. Adhisalai told him with a grin on his face that it was not more likely that he had survived and slaughtered absolutely all the players there. Hearing this, Lao Zhan laughed and answered him, he likes to play a joke. Adhisalai looked at him very intently and asked a question about what if he was not joking. Lao Zhan replied that he was responsible for the work and management of the union. They do not investigate cases of players being killed by players in dungeons, because this is not part of his duties. Stopping to talk, Lao Zhan thought about it and asked the answer question about how he would cope alone with such a large number of people. Not receiving an answer, Lao Zhan handed him something similar to a map, told him that he would send his data to the union, and since he had already reached the 10th level, then here is his AI, the card. He can use it to go to the union to participate in dungeon quests. Taking the map, Adhisalai was pleased, because the laws of this world do not apply to the dungeon, and this suits him very well. When Lao Zhan left, Adhisalai said that it would be necessary to fulfill the last will of the owner of this body. Already in the evening, Adhisalai passed the streets with huge houses and thought that from his memories he learned that the former owner of this body has a younger sister, Zio. She is the only person close to him, because his parents abandoned him as a child, and since then they have been helping each other. But since he captured his body, then his sister is now his sister. Now he will protect her instead of the former owner of this body. When Adhisalai finished his thoughts, he had already reached the door of his house. Approaching them, he heard his sister's screams that she would be released, because her brother would definitely come back and give them the money. In the end, he became a gambler. One of the men inside told her that her brother was only a level 1 warrior. What was there to be proud of? Having asked this question, he continued to say, I praise myself that here he is a duelist of the 15th level. After praising himself, the man told her that even if her brother returned from the dungeon alive, there would still be little money from the sale of resources. Besides, given his level, he was unlikely to survive. With these words, he really upset Sister Adhisalai almost to tears, but despite this, the man continued to tell her, grabbing her hand, that they only had this house left, so they should get out of here because they would take it on account of debts. By this time, the door to the house opened and closed. Hearing the sound, all the people in the house turned towards the door and saw Adhisalai standing there. As soon as he came in, he told them that there were somehow too many of them here. The guy holding his younger sister's hand said his name, Zhaoking, in surprise. His little sister, however, when she saw him, was overjoyed and called him brother. Adhisalai started counting all the people, pointing his finger at them, until at the same time the man released his younger sister's hand and said that since he also became a player, he would not beat him, so he should take his sister away from here and roll away. Having said this, the man asked Adhisalai, what does he think there? Adhisalai, making an intimidating look, replied to him that he was counting the number of points he would get for them. The man was in a huge shock, because without even having time to react, all his people were already lying on the floor. He wondered to himself that Adhisalai had only recently become a player, and came out of the dungeon so greasy. How is this even possible? After these thoughts, the man knelt down and called Adhisalai Zhaoking, asked him to have mercy on them. because they made a mistake and confused his sister with another person. Adhisalai looked at his little sister, who was standing next to him, and asked her if she wanted him to kill them. To which Zio replied that killing people is bad, so it's better to just let them go. Hearing this, the man began to thank Zio, saying that from now on she would be a deity for him. Zio, pulling out his tongue and pointing at his eye with his finger, told him that she was not so old yet to be his deity. He just had to behave like a good person and not offend other people. Adhisalai was thinking at this time that it was one hassle, and it would be easier to kill them. Then thinking, he continued to think that this man looks like the main local punks, and since he didn't kill him, then at least you can use him. After these thoughts, Adhisalai asked the man if they have a black market here. The man answered positively, and also asked him if he needed something, and if so, he knows everything here. After hearing his positive response, Adhisalai pressed a button in the system and put a lot of different things on the floor. Then he told the man that he got these equipment and resources in the dungeon, and now they need to be sold on the black market. Seeing such a huge amount of equipment and resources, the man's mouth opened, but then he asked Adhisalai that he could snatch so much from the first dungeon. The man wanted to ask more questions, but Adhisalai looked at him with a threatening look and told him that he would not ask unnecessary questions if his life was dear to him. Hearing his words and seeing his intimidating look, the man immediately covered his mouth with his palm, thinking about how creepy Adhisalai is, and it's better not to joke with him. After that, Adhisalai added that they could take payment for his debt from the amount received, to which the man replied with a smile that there would be much more money here, so he would bring him everything that remained. The man also asked him that he was able to get so many treasures in one raid, which is why will he allow him to hand over others. As a reward, the man will take only 5%. Adhisalai answered him positively, but at the same time he should not tell anyone that he sells everything on his behalf. Having said this, Adhisalai told himself that there was indeed a lot of treasure, so it would be difficult to avoid suspicion, but otherwise it was a solid benefit. After hearing his consent to allow the sale of other resources and equipment, the man was very happy, and calling Adhisalai his money deity told him that their cooperation would be fruitful. After a couple of minutes, all the people lying in the house got up and began to leave, bowing to Adhisalai and his sister. The man before his departure told Adhisalai that as soon as he sold everything, he would come to him in a moment. As soon as all the extra people left their house, Zio hit Adhisalai with her fist, asking him why he came just now. Then she added that she was very worried about him. Seeing her face, which is just about to cry, Adhisalai exhaled and sat down on the floor, apologizing for being late, stroked her head and continued to say that she would not cry, because now he is here, and now no one will dare to offend her. Saying this, he wiped her tears, and Zio, listening to him, grabbed his hand and began to comfort herself about it. When night came, Adhisalai sat by Zio's bed while she slept, looking at her sleeping. Adhisalai reflected that so many years had passed, and he could still feel the warmth of kinship ties. Getting out of bed, he continued to inflate that he did not know if his relatives from the past had survived. Then, moving away from the bed a little, he told himself that the time had come. After these thoughts, he quickly changed into his epic outfit, and putting on his mask, he said with a very scary voice that it was time to carry out his plans. He told himself that he would start from here, and if he succeeded, he would be able to snatch a big jackpot. Having said that, she began to summon the teleportation portal. This ability opens a passage to the Brought dungeon, and dungeons are very rare for players, so if one opens, then people will immediately run into it. The Adhisalaya monsters that are there can also increase their level by killing players, and due to the fact that the previous massacre raised the level of these monsters to 15 or even higher, Adhisalaya gained experience just like a gold mine. People's greed leads to misfortune, and it is she who will ruin them, so do not blame him. Saying this, Adhisalaya returned a lady. The next day, in the morning, Adhisalaya was preparing breakfast for Zio, when everything was ready and Zio saw the breakfast in front of her. She was shocked and asked Adhisalai, calling her brother, about, does he really want to poison her with such food? After asking this question, she went on to say that until he became a player, he knew how to cook well, but why did he completely forget how to cook now? Looking at the terrible looking food, Zio, assuming, asked Adhisalai, was he really replaced in the dungeon? Adhisalai, smiling, began stroking her head, saying to himself that she had hit right on the spot. At the same moment, their front door to the house opened, and Zio and Adhisalai heard a familiar voice, who, addressing Adhisalai as joking, said that he had sold all the things and had come to give the money received. A man who came into the house approached Adhisalai holding out a card, said that the money he received from sales is in this card. The password is Jukrasava and there are as many as 2 million on it. Hearing this, Zio was very happy, saying that they were rich now. Adhisalai, taking the card with a calm expression on his face, said to himself that according to Zio's face, this is a large amount, and this money should be enough for expenses. After these thoughts, Adhisalai told the man that he had something else to do for him. He wanted to go to a new dungeon, so in his absence, the man should take care of Zio. The man heard this and touched his bicep, answered him that he would rely on him, and from now on he would become their personal housekeeper. Adhisalai touched his shoulder and told him to start making breakfast, but it's time for him to go. Leaving Adhisalai reflected that, although he is not a good person, he loves money, so he will not betray him for nothing. Having already reached the entrance, Zio hugged Adhisalai by the leg, asking him not to leave. Adhisalai touched her head and said with a smile that he had important things to do right now. Zio immediately told him to be careful, and that he would return soon. To which Adhisalai replied that he would definitely return as a lady unharmed. Leaving Adhisalai waving his hand and with a warm face shouted to Zio that she would behave well. Zio, who was standing next to a man who was also waving goodbye to Adhisalai, told him not to worry, because she is the most obedient. As soon as Adhisalai turned away from them, he immediately changed his face and told himself that he would first go into the dungeon in order to collect conquest points and see who was unlucky enough to get there. After some time in the eastern district of the Players' Union, Adhisalai was sitting at the table alone and said with an annoying voice that he would never have thought that he, Adhisalai, would be in such a situation because someone does not want to take him to the party. Shouting this, he hit the table out of anger and began to remember about all the refusals that he was told. The first team refused to take him in because they did not want to take a warrior with the 10th level because he would only get in the way. The second team refused because they needed a magician and support now. But when one of the members of this team told the captain that a nice girl from the VOM classes came to them and with the 10th level and she wants to join them, they immediately took her, because the captain adores beautiful girls. After these memories, Adhisalai exhaled and said that the only good news was that several players had taken raid tasks for his dungeon. Wishing these players an early death, Adhisalai, hearing in his address whether he wanted to join their team, looked at them and saw a small team with 5 players. The commander of this team told Adhisalai that they had taken a task in the dungeon, but they were missing another player, saying that he asked him if he would go with them. Hearing this, Adhisalai thought at first, but then immediately changed in his face and bitterly crying thanked them for finally being called by someone. The commander of the team answered him, not for anything, because they still lacked a man for a forward attack. After all the thanks, their team set off on their way to the dungeon. Rutan and Stalker, who were on the second floor, watched Adhisalai and the people who came to invite him. Then Stalker asked Rutan if it was his doing, to which Rutan replied positively, saying that their people were already there. And when the time comes, Adhisalaya will be killed, and then they will look at his inventory to find out if he has equipment. Then, after being silent for a while and grinning, he continued to tell Stoker that the burial fields had been updated, and the difficulty level had dropped, and there was still an opportunity to resurrect, so if Adhisalaya did not have the equipment, their subordinates would clean up the dungeon and bring them what they had obtained. In the end, Rutan added that this was a plan without flaws. Sitting in the car that was going to the portal of the dungeon, Adhisalai was thinking that the guys with whom he was going were some very strange, and why should they go to a low-level dungeon? Adhisalai was also a little shocked that a huge and intimidating samurai was riding with them. Having reached the portal to the dungeon, the guys got out of the car, and when they approached the portal, the system showed them that this is a dungeon, the harbor of the fish people. And there are also level restrictions from the 10th level to the 25th level, and restrictions on the capacity of 5 people. And the goal is to defeat the boss this dungeon. Seeing this notification, Adhisalai smiled, because now it became clear to him why these players need to come here. Then imagining the dungeon boss with lots of jewels, Adhisalai ended the thought by saying that they were heading to this low-level dungeon for the things that are there. Entering the dungeon, the team commander told the magician and the support to stand in the middle and protect those in front. The magician girl, standing in the middle, spoke to Adhisalai, calling him a warrior. She told him that he would protect her because she was new here. Adhisalai, hearing this, said to himself that he didn't have much time, so it would be good to kill her and gain experience. When the team got closer to the nearest small lake, monsters similar to humans and fish jumped out of it with pitchforks in their hands. Seeing them, the mage girl who was talking to Adhisalai turned in his direction saying the words warrior, but she was shocked when she saw that Adhisalai began to run away from these monsters. Adhisalai, running away, thought that there were a lot of fish people there, and because of this, he would first have to get out as soon as possible. The battle began, and the second mage girl used fire magic to kill monsters, shouting to the others that they would protect the priestess and not let her hurt. Everyone started killing fish people using their own methods, using different abilities and different types of equipment, and Adhisalai, while running away, also wanted to kill two of them who got in his way, and in order to hide his abilities, Adhisalai needs to use only the skills of war. And having already reached the desired distance, Adhisalai activated the warrior's skill battle cry and attacked people with a roar using a sound wave, and was able to stun them. And just as he was about to deliver the last blow to kill them, Adhisalai noticed that a powerful blow of fire was flying in his direction. He managed to substitute a sword and thus defend himself, but the fish people were fried and torn apart. The girl mage attacked with a huge fireball towards Adhisalai, immediately apologized to him, saying that she suddenly lost control of the ability. Angry for a second, but then falsely smiling, Adhisalai replied to her that everything was fine, and next time she would definitely be able to control her ability. The magician girl who talked to Adhisalai and asked to protect herself after the battle, called everyone so that they would all come to her, so that she would heal them. Glaring angrily at the girl who attacked with a fireball in his direction, he began to say to himself that this Magica was definitely aiming at him and not at monsters, and she definitely wanted to kill him. Thinking about it, Adhisalai asked himself the question of whether Stoker could have sent her to him to kill him. After this assumption, Adhisalai looked in the direction of the samurai and continued to think that he was too strong for the 20th level, although it is clear why he came here. Turning away from him, Adhisalai opened the system window and unlocked a couple of additional skills for his safety, because he doesn't know what might happen next. The team commander approached Adhisalai from behind and touching his shoulder told him that although there were a lot of fish people, they did well, and now they should continue searching for the dungeon boss and try to clean up this dungeon quickly. On the way to the dungeon boss, the whole team and even Adhisalai fought the monsters they met, and having already reached the boss's room, which was in the cave, and there was a large lake in the cave, and there was a practically broken ship on the lake as soon as they entered the cave. The team commander told everyone that they would be on the alert. After walking a little forward, the mage girl who had previously attacked Adhisalaya attacked him, telling her other companions that they would also attack him. The team commander and another male player attacked him, but the samurai and the mage girl stayed away. Adhisalai managed to dodge her blow and the subsequent blow, which was inflicted by her partner, but the commander of the team, being behind him, was able to injure Adhisalai and hitting with all his strength. He made it so that he flew off and hit the ship. The girl who treated everyone asked them if they were crazy, and why are they attacking the player just like that? The commander of the team, hearing her questions, looked at her with an evil look, holding a medium-length sword in his hands and told her to close her mouth if she wanted to live. Adhisalai at that time, having hit the ship, began to fall into the water, but before he fell completely, he managed to tell himself that as he thought they attacked him, but he was sure that they would attack him a little later. When Adhisalai fell into the water, a huge deep-sea catfish with the 20th level immediately emerged from the depths of this lake. He began to swim up to Adhisalaya, and when he saw him, he smiled terribly, because he understood why those players attacked him here. The players standing on the shore, all except the samurai, asked each other at once if Adhisalai had died, while at this time, a huge deep-sea catfish completely swallowed Adhisalaya. One of the players who attacked Adhisalai answered the question that all the players asked, whether he died or not. It doesn't matter anymore, because he will slowly dissolve in the belly of this huge deep-sea catfish. And the team commander also asked himself why Stoker needed to get rid of such a weakling like him. Having asked this, he turned to his people and said that it was time to leave here. But as soon as they were about to leave, they heard a voice behind them asking them where they were in such a hurry to go. After this question, almost the entire body of the huge catfish exploded. Then Adhisalai, calling all the players gentlemen and ladies, told them with a joyfully crazy voice that they were doing a good dirty job for others. But that's not the task, because everything went against their plan. Adhisalai looked at them with a very creepy look and said that now it was his turn to die, and this is such a pity, of course, for them. While Adhisalai and the other players were in the dungeon, Stoker and his men were sitting at their base. While eating ice cream, Stoker asked Ruthen if he could rely on his people, to which Ruthen replied with a grin, so that he wouldn't worry, because even he himself is afraid of her abilities. Stoker looked at him and said that Jauken has a very strange energy, so it would be better for him to underestimate him. Ruthen smiled maliciously and asked him what problems such a non-entity could possibly bring, because he couldn't cope with her alone anyway. At the same time, Adhisalai was able to get out of the lake, but was immediately surrounded by opponents. The girl magician who treated everyone, seeing what Adhisalai was doing, asked herself that did Adhisalai just use magic? But shouldn't he have a warrior class? The surrounding Adhisalaya players were wary of looking at him. Adhisalaya asked one of them why he was not attacking, but only making eyes. Hearing this, the player rushed in his direction to attack, but Adhisalaya abruptly turned back to where the mage girl was standing, used the power of fire, and attacked her. Seeing that she could not withstand his blow, Adhisalai made a very pleased face and laughed to himself, saying that now it was the big guy's turn. Turning in his direction, he saw that the big man was already preparing to cut him with his weapon, but Adhisalai used the lightning ability to tear his left arm. But as soon as he did, the big man, despite his severed arm, attacked him with his right hand, where he kept his weapon. Adhisalai managed to dodge, but was surprised that his current could not paralyze him, calling him tenacious to himself, because even after losing his hand, he continues to attack, but it's still useless. The big guy wanted to strike again with a swing, but as soon as he did, Adhisalai broke his weapon. Having dealt with the big man, Adhisalai began to think that a strange feeling did not leave him, because the killer had disappeared from the very beginning, and he probably became invisible, but he still hears sounds and breathing. Having finished these thoughts, Adhisalai electrocuted the team commander, who was invisible. But as soon as he discovered him and electrocuted him, he grabbed Adhisalaya from behind, so that he could not escape. At first Adhisalai did not understand why he needed it, but then noticing the little magician he dealt with first, Adhisalai was in huge shock, because she was completely on fire. While Adhisalai was asking questions about whether they were people at all, and did they really want to die themselves, too, a girl burning with fire came up to him and exploded. She exploded herself and was only able to kill her partner. Adhisalai, who managed to escape, wondered if they really wanted to die with him. Then he suggested that they were probably under hypnosis, or where such loyalty came from. Adhisalai was able to survive after such a powerful explosion because he has a skill that gives complete invulnerability. While Adhisalai was thinking to himself, a girl magician healer came up to him asking if he was injured, and offering to treat him. Adhisalai relaxed his vigilance too much and too early, because he could not feel that his body was being taken under control. When he looked at her and saw the magician's girl, he immediately began to assume whether it was all her doing, and whether she had the ability to control her mind. His hand in which he held the sword began to move towards his neck by itself. The girl smiled and told him that he would not worry about the fact that he had killed so many people. Having said that, she told herself that he had a very powerful spiritual force, and finally she found a gap in it. At first, the girl wanted to deal with Adhisalai with the hands of those players, innocently staying on the sidelines, and that samurai would be her witness, but since Adhisalai thwarted her plan, she would have to deal with him herself. While she was thinking, Adhisalai's hand kept moving towards his neck. But when the sword cut his neck a little, he shouted to the samurai about how long he was going to just watch. Having asked this question, he immediately told him that he knew why he had come here, because he needed a weapon, but without it he would not be able to find it. Hearing his words, the samurai immediately drew his sword, and in the blink of an eye was able to be near Adhisalai and kill the magician's girlfriend. Falling to the ground, Adhisalai smiled and said that it was good that he was not at one with them. The samurai immediately asked him if he knew where to look for equipment, to which Adhisalai replied that he did not want to answer someone who did not show his face. Then he suggested that he take off his armor, and if he understood correctly, then he was hiding his level with them. The gaze of the conqueror Adhisalaya can determine the level of the enemy, and no equipment will help. Taking off his armor, the samurai responded positively to him, saying that this equipment was obtained randomly, and how could he find out about it? Having asked this question, the samurai's armor was completely removed, but behind the armor was not a guy, but a beautiful girl with blue and long hair. As soon as she showed her face, she told Adhisalaya that it would be better if he did not deceive her, otherwise he would share the fate of that girl. Looking at her, Adhisalai found out that her name is Miyamoto Nai. Her level is the 80th, and the class is a sword master. Miyamoto Nai put her sword to Adhisalai's neck and warned him that if he dared to deceive her, his death would be much worse than that of the girl she had recently killed. Adhisalai grinned and told her that if she didn't trust him, she could kill him, but without him she wouldn't be able to find him. Putting the sword back into the knives, Miyamoto asked him what he thought she was looking for. Adhisalai, after looking at her intently, replied that she was looking for a sword, of course, with a double devilish blade, the name of which is Hatekill. Adhisalai knows his location because it was he who hid the sword during his wanderings. Hearing him, Miyamoto happily confirmed his answer and immediately asked where the sword was. Adhisalai, teasing her, answered with a question, "Is this sword valuable and how much can it cost?" Miyamoto replied to him with a serious look that this sword is the basis for awakening her class, and if he helps her find it, then he can ask her anything. Adhisalai listened to her and inquiringly repeated the words about the awakening of the class. After hearing this, Miyamoto began to ask him questions about whether he seriously does not know about this, and how could he live up to today with such knowledge. Then, without hearing an answer, she began to explain to him that after reaching the 20th level, players receive a task to change the class in order to raise it to the next level. The so-called awakening classes are those that players can raise again after reaching the 80th level. The conditions for awakening are extremely harsh, but all players dream of getting this opportunity. Now only 7 people have awakenings, and they are called the 7 great heroes. They are the best of the best. After telling this, Miyamoto said that she was only 1 step away from waking up. Hearing this, Adhisalai asked himself that the 4 he killed, were they among the awakened ones? And when he will have the 20th level, will he be able to awaken the class too? After thinking about it, Adhisalai came to the shore of the lake, and turning his head told Miyamoto that she would get after him, because the sword is there. Saying that he jumped into the water, Miyamoto, making a serious face, also very quickly rushed after him. They did not swim for long, and soon they got to the shore of the cave, where there were many jewels uphill. Seeing this, Miyamoto asked Adhisalai, who was already walking to the shore, if he was sure that the sword was here, to which Adhisalai replied positively, saying that she would be quiet. After a little searching in the mountain of gold, Adhisalai found a sword. Throwing it at Miyamoto, he told her that her order for a sword with a double devil's blade wrapped in a black cloth in the amount of 1 piece was completed. Having received the sword, Miyamoto did not hesitate to open it from the tissues and took it in her hands. While Adhisalai was thinking that he seemed to have forgotten something, Miyamoto, having picked up the sword, seemed to be immersed in herself. When the cold air blew in the cave, Adhisalai drew his sword and asked himself if the gatekeeper was still alive and if he was here at all. As soon as he uttered these words, mountains of gold fell to the ground, the wind began to blow strongly, and after a couple of moments a huge shadow appeared. When it got closer, the system notified Adhisalaya that this was the king of the Pisces people, who has the 40th level, and his class, the genus of Pisces people. After seeing his level, Adhisalaya realized that his level is several times lower, and that is why it will be very difficult to kill him, if at all possible. After saying this, Adhisalaya turned to Miyamoto, who like a statue did not move from her place, and told her that her time had come and let her kick this giant's ass. But when he saw Miyamoto immersed in herself, he remembered that I was immersed in the world of dreams and I needed to fight with myself so that I could use him, and now there is no point relying on her. So Adhisalaya will have to do her a favor. Besides, he is sure that if he saves her life, then she will pay handsomely for her rescue. After thinking about it, Adhisalai jumped straight to the king of the Pisces people with a crazy smile, saying that you can't take him by force because he is several times higher in level. But when did such a thing stop him?